Someone who will certainly be bracing for the impact of these tariffs is Keanin Loomis, President and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction. Keanin, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time today. And I want to start off by asking, what do you make of Trump's doubling of the tariff on steel and aluminum to now 50%?
Yeah, it's difficult to swallow. I'm learning this just as I'm about to go on, and it's petty. Obviously, we're being played with by somebody who's driven by retribution, and at a time when like I just came from Washington, D.C. last week. A lot of people in Washington, Americans, not understanding why Canada is being targeted like this. And this is just further proof. There's nothing rational about this. It's about something else. And the president hasn't clearly explained what his animus is towards Canada. But it's completely unnecessary and it's petty. And it's going to have an impact on the markets. And this is a complete cell-phone on the part of the American government. They inherited an economy that was doing pretty well, and it's obviously not now. And it's just because of one person and his vindictive agenda.
Now, Trump says he could shut down auto production in Canada. Your thoughts, could that happen? And how damaging could it be?
It would be hugely damaging. He had a call last week with the automakers where they tried to explain to him just how deeply integrated that industry is and how impossible it is to be able to simply move production on a whim within a month, within a year, within 5 years. These are very long-term decisions that have been made. And so the industry has taken advantage of, just as we have, 40 years of free trade between our two countries. And a lot of decisions have been made as a result of that just can't be undone with the snap of fingers.
Now, this is not the first time Canada is facing these tariffs. We saw them in 2018 as well. Does this time feel different?
Well, this time is different. Last time it hit the raw steel produced in my hometown of Hamilton, for example. Stelco and Dofasco have done a really good job of fitting within that North American supply chain, as I talked about, completely, like, constantly innovating their product to make sure that they're able to compete in what is a very difficult global industry. But this time around, excuse me, the tariffs cut much deeper than that to apply to downstream products like fabricated steel that my members across this country they make and contribute to projects in the United States. So it is much broader, and we are trying to figure out how to react. Some of the regulations were just handed down just days ago. We have lawyers pouring through it, trying to figure out how we trade across the border these days.
How has the threat of the tariffs affected Canadian steel companies so far? Has there been a decline in production?
Well, there has been. It was just the mere threat that was required to completely upend the market and the industry. So as soon as tariffs are even whispered, all of a sudden the price of steel changes and goes up in response. And all of a sudden people start to lack confidence in the future and start to relook at their plans, both in the short term and the long term. Now, this is the case on both sides of the border. So this has certainly haven't had an impact on Canada. It will continue to have maybe more of an impact in Canada than in the U.S. because we are so more reliant on trade. But this is having an impact in the United States. I was there last week. Again, people scratching their heads, not understanding what is going on and what the real focus of these tariffs are. And so you see the markets in the United States responding. I mean, I know we're in a post-truth world, but there are still some things that cannot be manipulated. The markets being one of them. Consumer confidence in the U.S. is way down, as well as companies across the country, far away from the Canadian border, are starting to understand that their best customer, their biggest customer, is being subject to tariffs, being subject to unfair retribution, and is pissed off about it. So, this is not the actions of a business person or somebody who has tremendous business acumen, because they would understand that you don't piss off your best customer. This is really, really crappy customer service.
And I know this breaking news on the doubling of the tariffs is just coming in, but how do you imagine your counterparts south of the border are reacting to this?
Well, one of the most unfortunate things for us is recognizing that there are people within our own industry that have been advocating for shutting off their border and for reducing competition. And, we share the Americans' concerns about the overcapacity of steel in China. That is something that is having an impact across the world. So China keeps pumping out steel regardless of the market conditions, your normal supply and demand sort of calculus. These are state-run enterprises that are looking to flood the zone across the entire world and kill domestic industries. And so we understand that. We know that we share those concerns. We have been advocating for harmonization with the United States on this so that they are confident that we're not a transshipment point for Chinese steel. And so that has been our message. In return, what we see is our sister organizations in the U.S. not differentiating us and China. And so, sending a letter of support to the president last week for his actions on these steel tariffs, without regard to the fact that we actually have a contract, USMCA or CUSMA, that allows us and has allowed us tariff-free trade between our two countries. So it's really, really disappointing. And what we're seeing is that the steel producers in the U.S. in particular, sure, their revenue is going to go up. It'll be at the expense of the rest of the economy, and it'll be at the expense of their own workers. This is why the United Steelworkers, why the iron workers are against these tariff actions, because even though this brought in more revenue for the steel companies last time around, that revenue never made its way down into the wages.
How much faith do you have that Donald Trump will be willing to make some sort of a deal this time around?
Well, the sentiment that I got from the U.S. last week when I was there is that this just cannot be sustained. Again, you can't manipulate objective markers like the markets, for example, the Dow Jones Industrial. So eventually, at some point, we are going to have a grassroots bottom-up clamor from congressional districts across the country where jobs are being impacted because, again, so much of their trade comes to us or to Mexico as well. So jobs have to be impacted, I guess, for congressmen to finally speak out and for businesses to finally speak out. Again, nobody except for maybe one or two people in Washington right now understand why Canada is being targeted, but nobody is willing to say anything. And what we're finding is that finally, again, when it starts to impact Americans' pocketbooks, when it starts to impact their jobs, when it starts to impact their trade relationships, they will finally say something and hopefully break through to this president.
All right, we will have to leave it there. That is our time. Keanin, thank you very much.